Typically, it takes you about 6 to 12 months when you're going about you're finding a next position. That's on average, and that's often, so it is what it is. If you want to change that particular statistic, that's something that you can get down to that 30 to 90 day window. And that's something that part of the reason why we built the platform that we did is because we don't believe that it should take you 6 to 12 months to find next positions, next opportunities, whatever those might be. Now, sometimes you're going to go start a new business on your own or consulting, or you're going to be a co-founder or different things like that. That's going to take probably a little bit longer than a 30 to 90 day window because you've got a lot more to figure out. Less than 10% of the jobs are found by applying to job boards. We talked about this earlier on. And when you're talking about adaptable leadership and things of that sort, you want to keep in mind that applying to job boards, the people who own the job board companies like Indeed, etc., they're almost all owned within just one or two parent companies. Their revenue stream is driven by companies, and their goal is to get as many applicants to the company as possible. It is not to help you find your job. So it's kind of rigged against you, honestly, which is why so few people actually end up landing positions when they're applying to job boards. So Deborah had brought up the really great point about, how do I present myself as an adaptable leader, and how do I find that hidden job market? And that is, a big piece, again, of why we put together the platform that we did to help educate people. If you haven't learned that process, which why would you? If you're not in sales, you're not going to know this. How do you market yourself? How do you present yourself? How do you create a personal brand out of your identity? How do you talk about it comfortably and all of that? That is what leads to dropping off of the job boards, letting go, and frankly, coming to a much happier place. So you got to have this stuff.
Job boards, resumes, they're all web-based, all of it. So
it is web-based. That's right. That's right. And again, I don't want to say, everybody clings to the need to have a resume, and it is a good anchor for you. It's an important step to identifying your language and your message and everything. But the reason for doing the resume is to get to better storytelling that we talked about at the beginning. The other thing you want to think about is that 63% of job openings are brand new positions. They didn't exist before. So how do you get into those? And so some of those are, we do offer, we get a lot of inbound requests and get more and more each week for exclusive things for healthcare professionals and executives that are job opportunities. And we're now expanding that actually to bring in more board opportunities and co-founder and mentoring types of things, board advisory types of roles, because we're finding a lot of our particular clients are looking for those kinds of opportunities, either as a side gig or as a full-time, thing to transition into. So we're really focusing heavily on curating those kinds of things and bringing it together. And then we also are really keen on getting 4 new interactions every week. And you can do that in just 15 minutes a day when you learn how to do it right. So it doesn't have to be onerous, but 4 to 5 a week is really an important cadence to keep. And for some people, they're doing, even more than that. So 20 or so interactions, conversations that are leading to really cool opportunities and other introductions. The other key is that employee referrals are a big part of a lot of companies' method of bringing in people, which brings us back to that whole the hidden market and the hidden job market, and how do you tap into that has to be through employees that are connected in who can then refer you in. So it's a whole big sort of circuitous path to get there. But we pride ourselves on being connected to, between Kristen and I, goodness, we know probably most of the leaders in the different types of companies, and or are 1 degree away from the people that know them and are influencers and advisors to them. So we're here to help get you guys where you want to go, whatever kind of opportunity that might be. So let's cruise on to the next piece of this. Obviously, salary loss, that's a biggie. If you take 6 months or 12 months, there's a much bigger hit. So that's kind of an obvious thing too.
All right. So we're talking about adaptable leadership. And I think the pandemic certainly served as a reminder that the only constant is change. And I think it's been that way for a long time, but it's progressing, obviously very, very quickly. And so understanding, we're going to talk about what is really adaptable leadership. I mean, what does that mean? What are the four components or the primary pieces of adaptable leadership? How adaptability is driving business viability, right? And how do we build adaptive cultures? So moving from just an adaptive leader to building and fostering truly adaptive cultures. Because I think the most viable businesses of tomorrow are the ones that are really intentionally building adaptive cultures today, right? And then what we're going to talk about too is who versus what based talent decisions. And if you're actively in transition, for those of you that are, I think that's really going to resonate with a lot of you. Most companies are still focused on what-based talent decisions, and we'll talk about why. Understanding adaptable leadership, right? So the founders of the adaptable leadership model say it is the act of mobilizing a group of individuals to handle tough challenges and emerge triumphant in the end. Essentially, adaptable leaders are not only able to change, but to be successful and effective in a changing environment, right? And maybe they're even driving disruption and change. I think the best adaptable leaders are. And they can sense externally, right? They focus on both internal and external constituencies, right? In terms of needs, they can anticipate when the competitive market is changing, is turning. So change clearly is a constant. I think it's going to be something that is we are in a change obsessed business climate, and I don't think that's going to change. And so change requires adaptability, and adaptability is a who skill, not a what skill. Right? So the four components, the primary aspects of adaptable leadership. So essentially, emotional intelligence. This is something everybody talks about. Emotional intelligence in the simplest form is you're able to understand your own feelings and emotions and thoughts, and the feelings and thoughts and emotions of others, right? There's internal and external awareness, but essentially we're grouping that under emotional intelligence. So it's hard to be adaptable if you're not if you don't have some level of emotional intelligence or self-awareness, right? Organizational justice, I like that term, but really it speaks to equity, internal equity, right? You want to make sure that you're creating win-wins. The best leaders are those that understand what are the currencies or the individual motivations of their people and their stakeholders, and they help them win. They help them be successful. They put sort of the enterprise agenda above their personal agenda. Character, I mean, I think that it's hard to define, but essentially it speaks to what your word means to you, doing what you say, saying what you do, and representing your values in a meaningful way. And then development. There's a continuous learning mindset with adaptability, right? You're always wanting to understand. You're actively pursuing thought leadership, and you're probably embracing or embodying thought leadership internally and externally. So those are the four major components of adaptable leadership. So adaptability, can you still see my new slide here? Adaptability is business viability.
Yep.
So adaptability is, again, a tenet that is becoming a must-have in a business environment, large and small. And I think what we need to focus on is how do we not only look for these individuals, but build an environment or foster an environment that celebrates the things that are special about adaptable leaders, right? Adaptable leaders are usually the ones that are always offering better ways. They're continuous improvement thinkers. They are always about innovation, doing things better, different. I think Google is probably the most common example of people that embrace adaptability in an ingrained level, right? It's something that is not just a program or, settled in a meeting or a process. It is something that is part of, it's ingrained in who all of their employees are. And it's a belief, I think our values and beliefs are really the undercurrent in terms of how we behave, right? So is that making sense? It's more than a behavior. It's more than a program or a tactical thing. It's something that is part of how we act, how we think.
So I want to take a moment to just explain, our big goal is 200 professionals that we want to be working with this year to help you get to your perfect next opportunity. And these are the kinds of things that we, through the platform, help you refine, perfect, really get nailed down so that you do a very comfortable job of it, is telling your story in the right way. So Deborah brought up that whole point about how do I get to the right stories for the right things? Well, we help you identify, discover, what is it I want to do? What are my passions? How is I going to connect to the right kind of opportunities? Is there enough market for that? Are there jobs for that? Are there opportunities for that? What are the assets, the portfolio of assets that I need beyond just a resume? And it's about like 6 or 8 different things that you actually need. How do I build my brand online socially? And then, which begins to give you what we call inbound leads, inbound opportunities. So that's what you want, is people calling you, recruiters calling you, hiring managers, etc. And then how can you get intentional connections, really good intentional connections with a follow-up system? Gordon was talking about that too. Like, how do we, consistently connect with people and have a purpose before, during, and after our conversations to actually lead to something fruitful rather than a chit chat that doesn't actually produce much. And that's driven by having a target and a focus around that target, a bullseye in there about next opportunities. And then finally, coming up with, how do I close the deal? Whatever kind of a deal it might be, landing a board position, stepping into a co-founder role, getting onto an advisory board, or mentoring, kind of a role that's a paid consulting as a side or a full-time thing, or landing a full-time next position, whatever that might be. So that's what we focus on. And we've created the platform, which we'll show you on the next slide. We've got you want to click through the whole platform, focused on getting your brand pulled together. And then we have a fun little app that helps you to stay in touch with your network consistently. 3 different levels that we help you with, which is the Core Accelerator, which is a group conversation that we host, and then companion coaching if you're looking for something a little more personalized. That's some one-on-one that we add on with our Core Accelerator. And then our concierge is where we're literally delivering those leads to you and putting your brand together for you. So we build it all out and then generate those opportunities in an ongoing basis, because the fact of the matter is, people are changing their jobs every 2.7 years. It's dropped from 3.2 down to 2.7 years on average. So the networking piece of what you're doing, maybe doing right now, hopefully doing, is the thing you do all the time, and the job is what you do in between your networking. So that's why we put this platform together, is to help make it a sustainable process, so you jump to the next thing way faster and easier.
All right. So how do we move towards building an adaptive culture? So I think creating adaptive culture starts with building and or buying the people that embody that, right? That have that special skill. Again, it's a who versus what. So we have to stop worrying about what and focusing on who. And what does that mean? So those of you that are in transition, you've probably experienced, God, I was so close to getting an offer. We really hit it off. And then I got this note back that basically said, you don't have enough industry experience, or you don't have this certification, or you don't. And it's the craziest thing. And honestly, it's something that I see that happens in Denver more than I saw in like California or like big cities, right? It's something that especially in like finance, HR, even ops, you see a lot of what versus who based talent decisions. So what does that mean? So what is comprised of hard skills, right? They are tangible, teachable, quantifiable, like industry experience, certifications, again, right? That's what. And I'd say it's probably fair to say over 90% of companies start with what. And I'm not saying to throw what out the window. I think what's important, but I think starting with who is sort of the first screen, and then what is secondary. What is easier to teach than who. Sometimes we talk about it as skill will. And I would much rather teach somebody that is ingrained in our culture, that is aligned in our values, that is showing up and wants it, that maybe doesn't have the technical competency or doesn't have industry experience than the reverse, right? So what based talent decisions trick people into believing we're increasing our chances of success? We're mitigating risk. There are enterprise values, enterprise cultural tenets that will never change. Whether you are the janitor or the CEO, you should embody and embrace those values. And some examples might be, to your point, fierce commitment to learning, continuous learner, insatiable curiosity, you know, impeccable service mentality, articulates complex subject matter into tangible outcomes, right? These are things that, first of all, they're a lot harder to identify and assess. And that's why I think a lot of people are like, well, I mean, the question is always, how do I hire for soft skills? You have to design very intentional, star-based behavioral interview questions that allow them to share stories like you just did. That was a perfect example of you understand how to hire for who, and you actually built an infrastructure within an organization that did that effectively, and you measured the result, the outcome, the impact. So when we think about who, there's the values, the enterprise values that everybody's going to have, but then there's sometimes very nuanced functional values that change based on your job. For instance, for customer service, there may be different cultural tenets or soft skills that you seek than somebody in IT, in finance, right? Obviously, if you're hiring like a controller, or accounting person or something, it'd be immense detail orientation, right? And consistency, accuracy, cadence, creating a steady cadence. So you have to be able to understand, one, what are our enterprise values or our cultural tenets that will never change, and narrow that down to whatever, 3 to 5. You have questions that are aligned to those for every position in the organization, and then you design them functionally or for various positions or departments. And this should be a collaborative sort of exercise where you talk about what questions will help us probe for that. So I think because who-based skills or decisions are harder, a lot of people just say, well, who knows? It's the kind of person you want to have a beer with, they just get it. And then what they find is, that's not creating sustainable success, or it's not a predictor. In fact,
hey, Kristen.
Yes.
So what are you finding? Deborah had posed this question about what are you finding as the top 3 who traits to exhibit? And I find her wording interesting there about exhibiting traits. It's kind of like, which ones should you highlight maybe as you're, sort of talking with people, especially if you're in a transition and you're having a lot of conversations with others. So what are you finding top 3 traits to exhibit, the who traits?
Well, so are we asking, and maybe she can speak up.
And Deborah, you can unmute.
How do we exhibit our top 3 who traits to our company, to a company, or vice versa?
Hi there. What I am asking is, what are you seeing in your line of work as the top 3 characteristics in this who mentality that people are looking for? Because I may have my top 3, but I want to really target who I'm trying to target.
Yep. So here's the problem with that. I mean, I'll tell you, just because I interview lots of people, there's some that are just, they're on every single toolkit, or they're part of everybody's culture. But I think it's really important, to your point, to understand what are your personal top 3 who gives, right? So for me, one of them is complete transparency. Like I'm again, fiercely committed to authenticity and transparency. And sometimes that's almost a weakness, right? I'm going to tell you like it is. I'm going to ask a lot of different questions. Insatiable curiosity. So I think you really need to think about, what are the 3 that make me different? It speaks to your value proposition. One that I notice a lot that people have trouble articulating is somebody that everybody likes to talk about strategy. They must be strategic. Okay.
Mhm.
Basically,
Right.
that means that vision. They must understand vision. They must understand, how all the moving pieces align to that vision. But the most important thing in any hire at a leadership level is somebody that can operationalize and execute strategy in alignment with very unique and specific business goals and values, right? So I'd say that's probably on every single interview toolkit, and part of every single interview that I do is companies want people that, yes, they understand strategy and vision, but frankly, they value more the people that know how to operationalize that effectively for their unique situation. Okay. So that's
Good. No, that's good.
the other one would be, I think, you talk about ownership and accountability. So everybody looks for that, particularly at a leadership level.
Mhm.
The best way to articulate ownership in my mind is you see somebody outside your building, they're picking up a piece of trash. That's not their job, but they care about it so much that it represents where they work. They know that their customers and employees are going to see it. That's ownership, that to me, right? So how would you assess those things is sort of the biggest. I mean, we all sort of want integrity and honesty would obviously be another one. Somebody that's impeccable with their word, somebody that would never sacrifice. They don't make decisions based on financial return or self-interest. They make decisions based on enterprise values or customer values or those kinds of things. So
Okay.
those would be the most common. But now the art is, how do I design questions that really probe for that? And
Yes.
that's something that really I probably on the consulting side do the most with my clients. And what you really have to make sure you're understanding too is how to assess those things. So not only what to ask, but if it's a good or bad answer, or if it's a sophisticated or unsophisticated answer. And so what's a smart thing would be is a training around behavioral interviewing, especially as it relates to your core tenets and values or your functional values. I think every single company, before they go to market for a key position, should be looking at, does every single thing on this job description really reflect, really relate to our business needs? Industry experience? I don't see really how that can. I mean, I think, again, it's something that tricks us. It's tricky.
It's funny you say that, because I do agree with you.
I mean,
Is they use that as an excuse sometimes.
Well, it's, again, what-based decisions, they trick us. They make us feel like, are we increasing the probability of success? But really, what I'd like to know at the end of the day, be able to look at my clients in the eye and say, this is the best leader that you're going to be able to find based on their comp, their sophistication, their culture, all of that kind of stuff. Not, this is the best candidate that you're going to find within the microtechnology industry in Houston, right? I mean,
Right.
especially since the who-based companies, who-based talent decisions are going to be the people that have the most access to the best talent in the world. Like, they're thinking beyond their zip code. They're thinking beyond their industry. And I'm not, again, I don't want to underplay. I don't want to underrepresent the importance, for instance, a good example would be sales. Sales is one that you want maybe somebody to have a Rolodex or a book of business if you're going to pay a certain amount of money, right, at a certain level. So some people say, well, of course, in sales, you need to find somebody that has industry experience, because that's where their Rolodex is, or that's where their customer relationships are. But at some levels, it may be more important to have the tenets of sales, customer orientation, closing, somebody that's really comfortable in front of people, negotiations, influence, charisma. Those things are not easy to teach.
Yep.
Whereas the healthcare industry or the manufacturing industry or whatever, that is easier to teach.